As you were speaking about unable to have a child, like I literally felt my heart felt like it had been ripped out.
I can imagine that when you're going through menopause, it must add a kind of heightened fear and concern due to the changes that are occurring in the body.
It's an emotional roller coaster, which is going to bring up so much. But in the middle of that, we've got kids to get to school, work commitments, or, ill parent. So, men, instead of trying to fix, ask them what they need.
Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this.
Welcome back to another episode of Authentic Man podcast. And today I have a wonderful guest with me to talk about a topic that, I don't know that much about. I admit, before this episode, I've had, probably know a little bit more than the average man does, but it's not something I have an in-depth knowledge. And that's why I bring guests on to talk about topics that they really know about. And I bring the wonderful Emma Fullwood on to talk about menopause and what we need to know about menopause, because ultimately a lot of us are in partnership or going into partnership with women who are in menopause or been through it or will go through it at some point, and we're clueless. And I'm seeing a lot of guys just having a lot of relationship struggles. I've had a few men come to me and work with me who they're clueless about it, and it's creating conflict, it's creating strife, it's creating difficulty in the relationship. So in this episode, we really talk about what menopause is, the different stages of menopause, the symptoms, the signs of it as well, some of the kind of treatments, both holistic and medical, that can be there. We talk about the impacts of menopause on relationship and communication as well, and what we need to kind of be thinking about to move through menopause as smoothly as possible. I'm trying to think of a better phrase than that, but that's what's coming to me right now. And we talk a little bit about the shame, the societal shame about menopause and why it is kind of hidden and not spoken about in many ways. And we also talk about intimacy, and how menopause impacts intimacy and what we can start to do to solve the problems that come up, to solve the challenges that come up when it comes to intimacy. So yeah, it's a really juicy episode of a wonderful woman, Emma, who has a huge amount of energy, and I really love what she's putting out into the world. And before we get into the episode, if you listen to this and, some of these relationship problems that, I often talk about are something that you are dealing with in your life, in your relationship, whether that's intimacy, whether that's communication, and you'd like to support on that, then feel free to reach out. I'm taking on 1 or 2 clients now over this kind of summer period. So if you're interested in doing some work around that and transforming your relationship into being deeply connected, healthy communication, and loving and passionate intimacy, then feel free to drop me an email. All the details are down below in the show notes. So without further ado, I'll let you get into the episode. Welcome back, listeners, to another, what will be a fantastic episode. I have a guest for me today, someone I've known for a long while, and I followed on Instagram, and I have she has such a wonderfully infectious energy. And she's talking about a topic that we can talk about today that I think doesn't get enough airtime. I know this from talking to my family members, friends of friends, and so forth. And it's a topic I know that as men, we really don't know that much about. And there's still a lot of social stigma and hiding and a lack of information that can guide us in how we can kind of support our partners and be with our partners. So I thought the best person I know to bring in and talk about this topic is this wonderful woman having me today. Emma, how are you doing today?
Good. Yeah, we just spoke. I don't like to say I've got menopause brain fog, but I've got menopause brain fog. So I'm going to try and stay on track with the questions. I am actually feeling good today. So thank you. Yeah.
And I know you support women who are going into menopause, going out of menopause, and then probably other stages of life as well from what I followed you in content. But I'm really interested is how did you come to do the work you do today in terms of supporting women through this stage of their life?
Oh, because I'm going through it myself. I'm 40, let me get my age right, 47. And we're in 2024, and my last bleed was 2019. So I've had 2 spots of bleed since then. So it happened right before lockdown, a challenging time. But before that, I'd actually done a lot of courses on perimenopause. Like, I'm actually a perimenopause official coach trainer. So, pelvic floor coach, wellness, fitness, body transformation. So much work with women since I was 17 years old, but particularly since I had my little boy in 2011, I went big in women's health, pelvic floor after having a baby. So women's fitness. And there I was, this kind of like, well, I've passed all these tests and exams on perimenopause, menopause, and I'm healthy and I'm fit and I'm a women's health coach. So, of course, I'm going to sail through this thing, right? I thought that because I had this certificate, I was going to find it easy. And I didn't. That said, there's a lot of women that I know that have sailed through it. One of them being my mom, who loves to tell me, I didn't have any symptoms, I didn't have any problems, or you don't follow me, which really lands really well. That does not help. So that's how I got into it, not only working with women, having the qualifications, and also going through it and being through it myself. So yeah, totally understanding how some women feel, because it only, it doesn't affect every woman. And I've evolved and learned so much. I try to call it the midlife awakening and midlife revolution. Some days it feels like a midlife breakdown, and some days is extremely hard. Yeah.
Wow. Very honest appraisal there. And you said a word there, perimenopause. So we've got, and this is something partly for my own education. It's like there's the menopause, menopause, or the menopause as often called. And I've heard this term come up a fair bit recently. Perimenopause. Is there a difference? Are they the same thing?
Yeah. So I remember doing my certificate on perimenopause. This was many years ago, before it became heard more about, before women were saying, oh, I'm in perimenopause. It's something that I was in the coffee shop today and, oh, I'm perimenopausal. So I did the course before this kind of word came out. And again, I remember speaking to the older generation, and they were like, well, this thing wasn't talked about when I was a youngster. It's just menopause, you get through it. So the way that I describe it is perimenopause isn't a disease that you have before menopause. It's not like this 10-year, 5-year thing that you have and then the awful menopause comes. I would describe it as the time in your life where everything that isn't working for you, okay, maybe that's your busyness of life, maybe that's stress, maybe that's health, whatever it is, it's a time for you to look at this. So I like to call perimenopause like shining a torch on what you need to look at in preparation for menopause. So, whereas people seem to see it as some sort of terrible disease that is all of a sudden kind of like a black cloud over us, I liken it to girls. I only know what puberty is like for a girl. So, I do have a boy, and I'm going to find out what puberty is like for a boy very soon. But I only know the feeling of puberty for a girl. So before I started my periods, my body changed. I went maybe a little bit plump, or my breasts swelled, or I remember discharge and not knowing what that was. I remember having aches in my womb, but there was no bleed. So I liken perimenopause a bit to puberty, but obviously it's different. But that's how I like to talk about perimenopause. So it's like a kind of alarm bell for you to look at things that aren't serving you in your life. And I like to say our amazing bodies are here to support us and not to battle. They don't want to battle with us. They want us to feel good. And wouldn't it be great if every morning there was a little envelope from your body put on your pillow and it said, "Dear Emma, dear David, dear Emma, I've noticed you going to bed late and you're watching Netflix and you're drinking too much wine and you're eating too much sugar, and this is making life feel hard for me. So could you drink more water? Could you say no to people, look at your boundaries, whatever it is?" And then you could reply yes. But because the body doesn't talk, we have this thing that this perimenopause is this awful thing sent from our bodies to actually make us feel crap. Whereas what it is signals from your body to say, hey, right? You're not looking after yourself. There's too much stress going on in your life. You need to reconnect with your partner. Like the dryness in your vagina isn't because of a vagina issue. It's because of a stress issue. It's because of a dehydration issue. So that's the way I look at perimenopause. Like I said, I was very healthy, or thought I was very healthy, before I went into perimenopause / menopause. So I think if any woman's watching this and they're like, oh, well, I'm doing all that, there's always more we can look at, because I hadn't looked at my nervous system. So health-wise, great, but nervous system-wise, not great. So that is how I explain perimenopause. How does that land with you? Does that make sense, David?
It's like it's the doorway. It's like the doorway. It's the I feel like there's probably a much better word that's not coming to me at the moment. It's like the phase before, Yeah. It's like the phase we have to move before entering into menopause. And I guess that moves me perfectly into my next question: is what is menopause?
Hell. No, it really isn't. In my house, we call it hormones, as in, and this is a joke that we have. So my boy was in the back of the car once and he was like, "Why are they called hormones?" And I was like, "What do you mean hormones?" And he's like, "Hormones, those things that you have, hormones." And I said, "They're hormones, darling." And he went, "Oh." He said, "Well, what does hormones mean?" And actually he said, "But hormones is so much better because they're horrible, right?" And I love sharing that story. So hormones is, menopause is a change in the body. Basically, menopause is when our bleed stops or is stopping. And some women before menopause actually have a heavier bleed, whereas mine instantly stopped and never came back. I've had two spots since, but for some women it can get a lot heavier. So it's the transition of we've gone from maiden, which is puberty, teenage years, 20-year-old sexual, fun, free women. We go from maiden into kind of mother. And it doesn't matter if you're a mother or not, you haven't birthed, but this kind of house, buying a dog, getting a mortgage, all that, getting a relationship, all that stuff that you do in between, a job, so that you have security. So we kind of stay in that. And menopause, I like to call it can be called the crone. I actually like to call it the wise woman. So actually, if you transition and go, okay, this is happening to me. I'm losing my bleed. I'm getting tireder. My energy is low. I need different things. What used to fill me up doesn't anymore. It can feel really fearful that what you used to be able to do, you can no longer do, or you just don't have the energy for it or the drive for it. And you're like, oh my God, what's happening to me? So that's how it can feel so scary. But actually, if you go, okay, I'm changing, I'm growing, I'm evolving, that's when the midlife revolution, that's when the midlife awakening can happen to take us into this wise woman. So there's lots of different things that happen to our hormones, our estrogen, our progesterone. There's so many different ways of tracking, right? But even with the tracking, even with the different tests that you can have done, there's no fix for this thing, because it's actually a natural process, and everybody will go through it differently. So there's ways of testing with blood, and now they're saying, but unless you had a blood test every single day, it's not going to come back, because hormones shift all the time. There's the Dutch hormone test, which is weeing on a stick. But again, I've had clients and friends that have done that, but they've got obsessed with this. Oh, my progesterone's this, and my estrogen's this, and then it's this, and I'm like, I decided to come away from this and actually go into what I'm feeling, regardless of what the app on the phone or the test is trying to tell me. I actually feel XYZ because I'm an intelligent woman, and I know how I feel, and this is what I need. Okay, so menopause is a time where our bleed can stop or it can get heavier. But over the menopausal years, the perimenopause years, it kind of changes. Whereas you might have been regular every month, all of a sudden it's like, I'm having 2 bleeds this month, like 2 periods in a month. Or it can go, I haven't bled for 3 months. Am I in menopause? And then the bleed will come back again. So it's kind of like an uncertain time, an unpredictable, uncertain time that leads then into the menopause. And when do you know you're in the menopause? Good question. You can have all these tests and, you still don't know. And then the bleed, I had a client that didn't bleed for 5 years, a bit like me. And then all of a sudden her bleeds came back. Yeah, all the tests came back that she was in menopause. So the only time that they can really say that you are through the other side of menopause is if you're not bleeding and you haven't bled for a full year. Like I said, I know somebody that didn't bleed for 4 or 5 years and then a regular bleed came back. Explain that one. And I think this is where, for women, we have tried to live almost like robots. Okay. And I think men are trying to live like robots as well. So I want men and women to live in harmony together. I love men, right? But we've tried to live like robots for so long. And women in particular are very different to men. So we can't live like robots because our hormones do very different to men. Okay. Whereas you can be more steady. We're like this all the time, every day. Okay. And when I say to my clients, you're going to be the most unpredictable, chaotic, pretty much mess in menopause. That's so fearful, because in this world, we need to get up every day at the same time, feel exactly the same, drive the car to work, get in our meetings, and be like a robot. And that, I don't believe menopause is the issue. I believe life is the issue. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So menopause is, because I'm, as I'm hearing you say, it's like there's this, as you said, they have a marker for menopause being like, 1 year without a bleed. But actually, that's also a really unpredictable marker in and of itself. And I'm assuming, and this is kind of a half question, half statement, that menopause is kind of signifying, as you said, leaving the kind of maiden years into going into the, I think you said wise woman.
Yeah.
Because the word crone, it doesn't sound great, but I know it is kind of an elder woman, if I remember rightly. I feel like I've seen it on some sort of either tarot cards or some sort of chessboard or something. It's to signify the end of the years of fertility.
Yeah.
That's just the simple. The body's like, okay, this fertility stage or baby making or egg producing stage is coming to an end, and that the body is shifting into a new phase of being. And it's interesting what you say there about the menopause not being the problem, but being treated as if it's a problem, often medically or by women themselves or by men interacting with women. But actually, as you said, it's the way we have come to live in modern life, where everything is very regimented and rigid. So it's like you said, we have to get up at the same time, we have to be in the same place, we have to feel the same, we have to be consistent, we have to be like numb, emotionless, like, predictable. That's the thing. Life has to be predictable. And bringing in something like the menopause creates this unpredictability, right? Because at least the years leading up, the 20 or 30 years of bleed, as much as the emotions and the hormones are up and down, there's a predictability to that on a cycle of 28 days, 1 month. So now, as I mean, you say, as we enter into menopause, perimenopause, menopause, even that predictability goes out the window.
Yeah. And this predictability, and it's why many women love the contraceptive pill or love the coil. And, I'm not against or for, I don't get into that argument. I say, how does it work for you? Because actually, as women, we should bleed. Like, we should naturally bleed every month. But like you said, some jobs, women can't have that low energy before they bleed and rest and etc., because they've got to be the same all the time. And like you said, bring in, you actually never know when you're going to bleed, or your hormones are like a roller coaster. It feels so scary. Menopause feels so scary because of its unpredictability, like you said, and because we like to have this control, right? We all like to have this control. And it was a time where I felt most fearful. I felt like I didn't belong in this world because I felt like I was going crazy. And actually, it was something that I read in a book called Second Spring by Kate Codrington, an amazing book. And there was a quote in there that said, I realized that I wasn't going mad. It was the rest of the world that was mad, as in the rest of the world trying to keep up with this kind of constant, almost conveyor belt continuation of the same. And the fertility, as you were just speaking then, losing that ability to have a child. As you were speaking, because I'm a very embodied, this is what I teach, the, embodiment. As you were speaking about unable to have a child, like I literally felt my heart felt like it had been ripped out. And I have a child, I'm blessed with a child. But even so, it was like, oh yeah, it's the end of being able to produce. And also, you know, going through menopause as young as I did, there's other complications like bone strength, and you age more rapidly. So your skin dries up more, you know, and it's like, wow, I'm only 40. How old was I when I started? 47 now. So I'm only like 45 years old. What is happening? And that is, I would say it's scary, real scary time.
Yeah. And yeah, it must be, you know, you're going through, you've like I said, you've living life, and then suddenly there's all these changes that are happening, and there's not that much information about the changes, or they affect people differently, as you said earlier around your mother. And it's like, you know, she just sailed through it like she was having a little holiday, it sounds like. And I wonder, what are some of the other ways it impacts women, you know, maybe physically or kind of psychologically or emotionally?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that there's so many great posts on Instagram that I think there's the last count was 69, maybe more, of symptoms of menopause. Wow. So I'm not going to reel them all off. There's a lot. The difficulty is knowing when it is. I mean, when I say menopause, I might say perimenopause, menopause. I kind of mean the same kind of thing. But knowing when it's that, and knowing when it's brain fog because you're basically burnt out, because you're juggling full-time work, 2 kids, a dog, ill parents, a house, and relationship issues. Because I don't know anybody juggling all that is going to feel alive, right? Including yourself, David, you know, as a male. Okay, would you feel if, you know, and I'm just going to, you know, do a stereotypical family of a dog, 2 kids, 2 people working full time, a house to look after, both parents, you know, getting ill, and stress. Like, who is going to feel well balancing and juggling all that? So first off, like, these symptoms of perimenopause stroke menopause, I think they need to be there as a guideline, as I said, of, you know, if you are experiencing brain fog, then that's shining a torch on what are you juggling, rather than I've got brain fog because of perimenopause. So can we just shift that wording, and can we say, instead of it being a symptom of perimenopause, can it be I'm experiencing this because I'm doing too much, and actually being truthful. And then if we're still experiencing the brain fog, then yes, okay, this is like me at the moment. It is, I go a little bit chaotic. My sentences go all over the place. It's almost a bit ADHD, bipolar kind of thing, even though I've rested. But then I have so many tabs open in my head all the time. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, I need to do what I call a brain dump, because I've got 60 million tabs open. So I need to do a brain dump, and then I need to chunk things down. But when you've got a child saying, Mom, can I show you this on Facebook, on Fortnite, or Mom, I need to do my homework, and then you've got a WhatsApp and your own mother needs something, or, you know, that's the challenging thing. But to get to your question, the main ones that you will probably see if a man is listening to this is brain fog. What women were able to juggle before, they now can't, right? They simply can't. The juggling hands have gone, and now the balls are just like being dropped left, right, and center. Okay, and because this woman could do this before, like, I can do anything a man can do, and just as good. You know, if you're coming from the 80s, 90s power woman kind of generation that I'm part of, not being able to do it is scary. Okay, it's scary. Like, oh my God, I've forgotten dress down a day at school, did that. Oh my God, I've forgotten an appointment at the dentist, did that. You know, even though it's in my diary. So brain fog, I would definitely say, and not being able to do as much as you could do before. The mind being more chaotic. Like literally, like I did a live on this yesterday and I said, you know, when you walk past a school playground and all the kids are playing and it's just like this mumble of noise, that's like my head. Like just, so because of this, I used to be a person that loved going into busy places. I was always a person that loved being, could go to a networking event and I was like, look at me, speak to me, you know, pick me. And because of this noise, I went in. I couldn't go to these places. I'll give you another one, because you might be like, well, you could do that before. What do you mean you can't go to work? Or what do you mean you can't go to a networking event? Or what do you mean you don't want to go to the work do? Like, I don't want to go to the work do. I don't want to talk. Like, there was a wedding and I was like, I don't think I can go to the wedding. Do you mean you can't go to the wedding? You love weddings. You love putting a hat on and getting dressed. I can't go to the wedding, okay? And that's hard because then people say, well, why not? What's wrong with you? And it's like, I'm in menopause. But that's really hard. So brain fog, not being able to juggle, finding social situations hard, not being able to get your words out. It's like, you know what to say. And I started to have to practice what to say. Practice what to say. Me, like, I can talk forever. I started to have to practice what to say. So that was another voice in the head. You know, when the kid's asking for this and somebody's asking for this, I'm now practicing what to say. So that was huge. Places like, I'd share a funny story. We went into a restaurant on the seafront, a fish and chip shop, ordered the fish and chips, sat down. The music was too loud on the radio and they couldn't turn it down. And then the chairs scraping on the floor and the cutlery. We had to sit outside in gale force winds in Brighton on the beach with our heads up like this, eating our chips. And my boy was like, well, this is fun. And he was like, well, I didn't hear the radio. Like, I couldn't hear the radio. And I was like, what do you mean you couldn't hear the radio? So it's almost like, and they do say it can almost heighten maybe symptoms of ADHD, like times them by 1,000. And then so that's kind of stuff that I noticed. I was unable to leave the house at one point. I got ready to leave the house to go Christmas shopping, and I went, I can't go. My partner was like, what do you mean you can't go? You just spent an hour getting ready to go Christmas shopping. I can't go. So that's quite scary, like really scary. Physically, hair drying out, skin drying out, teeth. Like, did you know that your gums change?
Wow.
Like, because gums and teeth change in pregnancy, they change in menopause. You might find a lot of women, when they go to the dentist is saying, oh, you're biting down, you need a guard. That is actually linked to the pelvic floor. I shared this with a dentist the other day and she didn't know. I was like, if we sort the pelvic floor out, we can sort the jaw out. If we sort the nervous system out, we can sort the jaw out. So when as you probably know, David, we're all one. We're connected from the toes to the nose. Other physical things can be weight gain. I had that and I was like, oh my God, like I share this all the time. What is happening? Boobs getting bigger. Dryness in the vagina. Like, I'll share this one because I share everything. My vagina was so, the skin on it was so, vulva was so, it goes thin, basically. It started to rip.
Wow.
Now, can you imagine? You know your willy, your penis, David. Your amazing tool that you admire. Can you imagine all of a sudden it starting to rip?
Wow.
And the
Yeah.
how that would make you feel mentally, and the pain physically. You know, so the juice can dry up. And I'm a pelvic floor coach. So the pelvic floor has been something that my pelvic floor has always been something that I've looked after. I started to leak. I was like, oh my God, now I'm pissing my pants. Jesus Christ, what else do you want to give me? And that's when menopause can feel like a battle. So it was that was sharing quite a bit. That's sharing my changes and symptoms physically, emotionally. We get more snappy. We get easily agitated by you. Easily. So we get snappy with the kids because we've got all this fear. We've got all this going on. So anger is actually either a fear of the unknown, a bit like anxiety, but anger is also feeling unsafe. You know, when we feel unsafe, we can, just like an animal feels unsafe, so it can attack. So you've got all that going on, the body's changing, and also we want space. Okay, so our anger is our needs not being met. But many women are so fearful of saying, I don't want you kids around me. I don't want to share a bed with you at the moment. I can't cope with these kids, even though I manifested them and wanted them and went through IVF to get them. I now don't want them, right, around me. And that's scary again. Many women are too scared of asking for that space. So instead of asking for that space, we bang the kitchen cupboards. We say, I'm fine. Everything's fine. Because we don't want to actually say, I can't effing cope anymore. Like, can somebody mother me? I need mothering. Because with that becomes, where's that powerhouse 80s, 90s powerhouse woman gone that wanted to prove herself? And she's in this corporate job and like she's dropping so many balls. And at home, she's forgetting fancy dress day. And she's just like, and she just wants to scream, leave me the fuck alone. And she feels she can't. There you go, David. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. But when I hear all of that, I hear it's not just the symptoms that you're needing to be present with, right? Women need to be present with during menopause. We then add on top our personal story about what this means about us as a woman, or you as a woman on top of that. And then we kind of have this societal picture of what menopause is, right? And my experience around menopause, which is very limited, is just kind of observing the television and how it's spoken about around me, is there's a lot of like hush shame about menopause. It's a bit like, I'm trying to compare it to something that I probably have more experience of. I guess it's kind of like how I see we treat something like erectile dysfunction, for instance, right? ED, as men. We don't talk about it. No one actually is dealing with it. If someone's dealing with it, we don't really, talk about it. We're getting all these wonderful adverts on Instagram trying to sell us little pills for it. But for the most part, there is shame, hush, let's not talk about it from those around us. And I experienced the same thing about menopause. There's very few there's very few good images and pictures of women going through menopause. Like when you look in like movies, it's always, again, it's a bit like a man's sexual dysfunction. It's almost like this kind of fun making, comical poking at kind of constantly. And I wonder, like, why do you think there is so much shame that's kind of, and almost taboo that's shrouded around the topic of menopause?
Yeah. I went on Canva and put in menopause woman because I just wanted to share a different picture of me on a grid post. And all the women were grey haired and really old. Now, there's nothing wrong with grey hair because I'm thinking about growing mine out before all the Silver Sisters start digging at me. But, you know, they would look like I was like, well, that's not how I am. I think menopause is spoken about, maybe it's because I'm in the menopause kind of sisterhood society. I think it's spoken about a lot. What I hear it spoken about is almost like trying to find the fix. And it's more tutted at, like you said, I'm in menopause. Yeah, it's perimenopause. A bit like leaking, like you said, you know, tenor ladies are laughed at, or it's like pissing myself laughing, hashtag. Or I couldn't go on the trampoline because I'd piss myself, ha, ha, ha. And I'm like, when I hear that, I'm like, let's sort it out. We don't have to be like this. So, and then with menopause, what I hear a lot is, I'm in menopause, and it's almost, do I take HRT, bioidentical hormones? Again, it's this pill, like low libido. There's a pill. Somebody sent me a pill for low libido, and I'm like, hands up. Years and years ago, I tried to take a pill for low libido, a herbal one. But it wasn't that. It was other stuff that was causing low libido, right? So, yeah, so it tends in with women, I think it's talked about a lot and then not enough. I don't think it's talked about enough as in, you know, how it's going to make you feel emotionally. We talk about the symptoms and then we talk about the drug to take it away. You know, there's not enough that talks about the grief of menopause. You know, let's talk about the grief that might be involved in menopause. And whenever you tell, like I've shared my story a lot on Facebook, and I've shared what I'm going through, and there's always comments from beautiful women that mean the best, right? And they say, oh, you should try HRT. You should try bioidentical hormones. Have you tried this? Have you tried this powder? Have you tried this? And I was one of those women many years ago that did this. And I've since learned, listen to the woman and just hear how she's feeling. And then reply with, and this, you know, this is a great way of how men can support, like, I hear your full to capacity. Is that, you know, I see your full to capacity. It's a great way, rather than I'm witnessing you're not coping at the minute. That does not go down very well. Or you used to be able to do this, so what's the matter with you? Like, I'm witnessing, I'm seeing that you're full to capacity, or I'm seeing how hard and challenging you're finding this. How can I support you? Or is it enough support to just be, I mean, I was talking about a comment in a Facebook post, but if you're in a relationship, you know, I hear that you're full to capacity at the minute. Is there, you know, come and let's have a hug, you know, let me hold you. And what is it that I can do or say to support you? Or what is it that you need? Rather than us, you know, trying to find this fix. You know, I've got a great person that I know who loves me dearly said, this is not my boyfriend, by the way. If he's listened to this, he'll say, I didn't say that. But somebody who knows me very dearly said, oh, you should get on HRT. Well, that went down really well. Because it isn't for everybody. And I tried HRT 3 times, just for the record, and it hasn't worked for me. There's, I think it is being spoken to a lot more. Again, like I said at the beginning, it seems to be this awful thing that we're trying to find a pill to fix, when actually it's an emotional roller coaster, which is going to bring up so much.
Yeah. And you mentioned something there a few times, HRT. I don't fully know what HRT is, but I think for the men listening and whoever's listening, I'd love you to explain what is HRT.
I don't really understand it myself. No. It is you can take estrogen and progesterone in different ways, at different times of the month, or if I remember right, I had a gel that I rubbed on my legs. That was it. The first thing I tried was a gel that I rubbed on my legs, which was really freezing cold, and you had to wait for it to dry in before you could put your pajama bottoms on. I know that seems like as a ridiculous thing, but it was freezing. And then I used to take a pill at night, which was the progesterone. So that's one way of taking it. Another way is I had a spray that I had to spray. So that was, and I ended up having about 15 pumps of this spray. And then I think I took a pill as well, which was a progesterone. And then third time I tried the patch. I didn't want the patch because I didn't want a plastic thing on my body. I just didn't. So I tried it on my hip because it has to go on a fatty area. So I tried it on my hip, then I tried it on my bottom, then I tried it on my stomach. And if you're wearing jeans, you pull your trousers down to go to the toilet and the patch comes off. So it's a bit annoying. And every time I sat down, I could feel this plastic thing on my belly, which is just a reminder when you're going through a lot of stuff. It's just a reminder. That said, for some people, HRT is a miracle, right? For some people, it is a miracle. And for those that have found it the miracle, fair play. I'm so glad there's something, pardon me, out there to support you. Keep taking it, right? Keep taking it, because I am not a GP. For me, I tried it privately and with the NHS. And for me, it didn't do what it said it was going to do on the tin. And I speak to many women like this because if there's not this HRT or bioidentical hormones, which is another type of HRT, and everything that you're investing in, there's like, I spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds on powders and potions that promised to take this menopause away from me. And that's like running a marathon and expecting to come out of the marathon with a hip problem and taking a pill and the hip problem to go away. Okay. So for me, it didn't work, but it's being marketed as a wonder drug. And if it does work, amazing. And I tried it on and off for 3 years and then eventually just went, no more. I'm going to sort this out myself. And that's when I realized that my menopause issues, symptoms, experiences, that's what I like to call them, was actually more of a lifestyle problem and a nervous system issue than actually, yes, the bleed had gone. Yes, this was happening, but actually it was more of nervous system than anything else. It was more of a feeling unsafe. It was, which is why I went into hypnotherapy and did inner child work, realizing that I had unprocessed emotions that I had held in my body for 30 years, 20 years. And in menopause, like I said, perimenopause, it comes and shines a torch. And in menopause, it's here I am. You didn't look at me. You didn't do any of the nervous system stuff. You didn't do any of this. And now here I am. So HRT is a wonderful drug that you can get from the doctor. You can get privately as well. There's various ways of taking it, like I said. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, the woman, like me, can feel even worse, which is why, ladies and gentlemen, if you are listening and there's an Instagram post or a Facebook post, please do not comment, have you tried effing HRT? Because pretty much every woman going into perimenopause, menopause knows what HRT is. And for some reason, and for some women that are more spiritual, holistic, right, that don't like to take pharmaceutical drugs, okay? For them to go on to HRT is a huge thing because they feel, you know, I know some clients that have all their life sold tinctures, herbs and potions and being foragers, you know, foraging and, you know, plant medicine and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden they are having to say, I'm on HRT, right? Because it's, you know, because it's almost like they've got this imposter syndrome because what they stand for hasn't worked. And, you know, I was in the coffee shop the other day and the only conversation I ever hear is, oh, HRT, this, that, and the other. No one's looking deeper. Lifestyle, inner child, nervous system, relationship problems, emotional overwhelm. No one's really looking at that.
And I guess that's a very common way in which we tackle anything that we see as like a problem. We just go, let me can I take a drug for this to make this go away? And, you know, not looking necessarily at the root cause of what's occurring. As you said, it could be emotional issues, it could be relationship problems, it could be unprocessed emotions from the past and experiences that they, you know, in the time when the body is going for a change, it sounds like what's occurring, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that these, as you said about the perimenopause especially, is that these things have a space to kind of come up. It's almost like they're designed this way. It's like this is a time where we're shifting into a new stage of life, a new stage of our being, and the things from the past that almost like they should be not left in the past, sorry, things in the past that have not been buried, and you can use this kind of idea of birth and rebirth, these things that have not completely been buried or processed or let go of, they come up for the purpose of being processed, they come up for the purpose of being looked at and to be integrated or healed or whatever phrase we want to use.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be great if we could, I totally agree with what you're saying there. And the great thing is if we could spend a couple of years processing all the stuff that's coming up that we haven't processed. But in the middle of that, we've got kids to get to school, work commitments, or, you know, ill parents or whatever, right in the middle of the most challenging time. And this is why I think so many we're looking for that, take this away from me. Do you know what I mean? Because we just don't have the time and the energy to kind of process it. And what I'm hoping with the next generation is, with my little boy, I process a lot of stuff that is happening now. And I'm hoping that the next generation, it may be a little bit different. Whereas, you know, my generation, it was, oh, don't worry about that. That will pass. Just let it go. Instead of saying, okay, yeah, you feel crap about this. You've got to feel this. Yeah, you've got to feel this rather than let it go. So in my own processing through menopause, stuff came up in dreams. And I was like, oh, that means I've got to look at this. Or I just burst into tears. and realize, unprocessed stuff. Like if we go back to seeing, I cry a lot at seeing babies in the street. Okay. Now, I don't want another child. Okay. It's not something that I wanted, another child. However, what I realized was you go from maiden to mother so quickly. And what they're realizing now, that maiden to mother is actually like such a huge shift. Okay, such a huge shift. And going from a maiden to a mother, there's going to be a grieving process. All of a sudden, you can spend 3 hours getting ready. You can sing to Madonna down a hairbrush. You can go to the gym when you want to go to the gym and do all this stuff. And then you can't have a shit in peace for 13 years. Like literally. And like there's this grieving process that I never grieved going from maiden to mother. And I was like, why am I crying when I see babies all the time? And then that hit me. Oh my God. And then now it's, I'm the older mom now. Like my child's at secondary school. And then it's like people start talking about pensions. And I'm like, what? How did that happen? Right. So there's this grieving process. And also a massive thing that came up for me was unprocessed trauma from childbirth. Because you have this childbirth, you give birth, and it can be beautiful. And I hope it's beautiful for every woman. And I'm seeing it changing again. I've got clients that are midwives, so I see a change again, which is brilliant. Mine wasn't. Mine was traumatic. And I never had time to grieve. They called me postnatal depressed, but I didn't want to take the drugs. But then I just got on with being a mother. And all of a sudden I was thrown in menopause, and I was grieving for the birth that I had 10 years ago. And that can sound really weird because people are like, but he's 10 years old. Why are you bringing up birth trauma now? He's 10 years old. But I had to let's go through this. Let's give this love. So, a lot of stuff comes up. And I think processing the stuff is going to help me go into this, I call it the wise, wild woman. So as I'm shifting out of this now, I'm this energized, sexy, horny, juicylicious, delicious, wild, fun woman again. But I really feel I only have got this again because I went through that and delved deep and did the stuff, which was hard. And I think that if we choose not to do the stuff, and when I say choice, it was hard, because it couldn't work as hard as I wanted to, which meant, I had to credit card some stuff and whatnot, and that brings shame and fear. And it was a challenging time. And my dad died at the same time as well. Like, Dad, the worst time ever to die. Come on. Like, just coming out of lockdown and you're in menopause, and, it was really, really hard. But I chose to look after myself. And I think that the women that can't or don't know this stuff, I think this is the women that end up to be cranky, bitter, snappy, as tense as an elastic band, waiting to snap when they're in their 60s. And we all know a woman like that. We can all send her love because she's just got unprocessed stuff. She's just got unprocessed stuff that, never got talked about in her generation. So we can send that person love. But I'm hoping that my generation, the couples in their 60s and 70s are going to work more in harmony than at loggerheads and, slamming doors and huffing and I'm fine and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So I'm coming out of it now like a sensational woman.
And you touched on something there, which, you know, I'm actually super interested in. You've touched on it a few times, is relationships and how menopause impacts relationships. And I'd love to know, you know, from your personal experience and from the experience of your clients, how does menopause impact our kind of most intimate relationships?
Oh gosh, massively, because we kind of have this logistically where if I'm talking if we're in a relationship with children, or a relationship with a pet, or, you know, we go to work, we get up, we go to work, the bills get paid, everything's kind of running as clockwork logistically. Yeah. Monday, you take the child to football, Tuesday that, you know, it's running. And then all of a sudden it's like somebody throws a spanner in the works and it's just not running as it did. And that can cause relationship problems. Okay. Particularly if you're in a relationship that you haven't connected and communicated for years. Okay. So you're in a loving relationship. By that means you love the person. By that, I mean you want to stay with the person, because it's different if you don't want to stay with the person. But if you're in a loving relationship and you are sleeping with this person, getting into bed with this person every single night, or not because you want separate beds because of your hot sweats, but you're in a loving relationship, but you've literally just been logistically just getting through life. There's been no communication. And then menopause comes, which, as I said, the woman's dropping the balls everywhere. She no longer wants you near her. She's snappy. She's agitated. She keeps saying that she needs to go to bed. She's tired. She's like a shadow of this person. She doesn't want to go to weddings anymore. You know, she's putting on weight. She doesn't feel like herself. That's hard to live with. Right? From looking at it, zooming out from a man's point of view, that must be terrifying. Like, what the F is going on? And unless you have been to communication school, which most of us haven't at school, I have done authentic communication, conscious relationship training. David, I know that's something that you do, so you understand this. But unless you've done that, as a man, you might go to work and it might be like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with her. Like, and then, oh yeah, my wife's got this as well. Oh, they're going through this kind of menopause thing, right? You know, mine is as well. And I'm not saying every man, actually, because I was at the coffee, because you just don't know what to do. This is not a dig at the man. And also the woman is so fearful, like I said, of letting everything go, this kind of powerful woman, that she's in this fear. So she's being snappy. And really, it's a lack of connection and a lack of communication. That's as simple as it is. And it is so wonderful to work with women, or couples, now that I'm working with couples, that are seeing this and they're like, well, how can we make it better? How can we dance off each other's energy? Yeah, because if in a family home, there's a lot of tension, and there's a lot of shoving of the kitchen cupboards. I say that one a lot. There's a lot of snappiness. There's a lot of not talking, a lot of silence, you know, and a lot of slamming the doors and running up the stairs like a little teenager, which we've all done. Then our children, whoever's in the house, are going to experience childhood, I don't want to say trauma, but they're going to experience, that's what they're going to learn from as well. They're going to learn that couples don't communicate, and, you know, relationships are hard and it's about a battle. Whereas it could be so easy if the woman said, I'm full to capacity, right? I'm full to capacity. I know I could do this before. I can't now. What are we going to do about it? Which is a very different way of saying, I do everything, like you don't do this and you don't do that. Because when anyone points a finger at you, we are going to get triggered, right? That person that you're pointing a finger at is going to get triggered. So then we end up in this battle. And, you know, from a male point of view, if you say, what's wrong with you? Like that is, you already feel like you've got this a playground of children in your mind and everything else going on. You're already feeling like, oh my God, I'm losing it. Maybe I should like go into the priory and have 8 weeks off, which by the way, would be an amazing thing for everyone to do. And then someone says, what's wrong with you? So instead of saying, what's wrong with you? I can see your full to capacity. Yeah, I can see that you need help. What can I do to support you? Yeah. And most of the time we don't want fixing, like back to the HRT, like, oh, maybe shall I run you a bath? Well, if you're in the middle of a hot sweat, no, you're just going to get, I don't want a bath. Can't you see I'm having a hot sweat? And then in the next argument, it would be like, I can remember saying, you never run me a bath. And they're thinking, well, you didn't want a bath last time. And this is the unpredictability of women. So men, instead of trying to fix, ask them what they need. Bring safety into them. And safety is a hug. Holding them. But, you know, you might even have to ask, is it okay if I hug you? Because actually, if they're having a hot sweat, they ain't going to want you near, right? Is it okay? My partner said, I don't know what I can do to help you. Can you tell me? And I shouted, I don't know either. And then we just fell into this beautiful cuddle where I was just crying. And I said, well, that's it. That's what I needed. I needed to be held, witnessed, seen, supported, and to cry. And I'm okay now. So it's that support, not trying to fix and not coming in at, this is the woman saying to the man and the man saying to the woman, you do this, you need to do that, it's always sharing from a place of I need, right? And that consent as well is huge. And if we look at intimacy, sex, the worst thing that you can say to a woman who vagina is dry, whose libido has gone and done a runner, who is up to here is, do you fancy a bit? Right? It's like, what is it? This is what I've heard. Do you fancy a bit? We've not had it in ages. When are you going to want sex again? Because you ain't going to get it. Or if you do get it, what'll happen is the woman will give it you out of a sense of duty. And I don't know a woman, me included, that hasn't had sex out of a sense of duty. Okay? And this can be hard for men to hear. And sometimes, you know, it's something that we do as a loving thing. You know, we love this person. We are okay, we're open to him to enter us. We feel our heart is being penetrated and we're okay with that. Okay, so sometimes it's out of duty is not always a bad thing. But sometimes it's like, oh, go on then. And we kind of like get it over and done with. And this will make your partner drier. I don't mean that you're making her dry up, but this will dry her up even more. This can cause pain. This can cause lack of internal sensation. Okay. And this can and will make her not want it even more. And she will also, and I know this because I've spoken to a lot of clients about this, she will also stop kissing you. She will stop hugging you. And that's because we all know what happens when a man gets turned on. And isn't it amazing that a man can have a cuddle from a woman, and our bodies and our presence, like this is one for women, our bodies and our presence can make your man horny as hell. So if you're thinking, my body isn't right, my body is fat, my love handles this, my cellulite this, my boobs this, you can hug your man and you do that. Like, how awesome is that, right? But we stop hugging you because we don't want to get you turned on. Because we are so in our heads, so like, what the F is going on, that it feels another person to serve, another thing to do. So that I've seen a lot of women say that they have started to kiss goodnight and roll over, or even the kissing goodnight stopped, or the hugging in the kitchen, because they don't want to turn you on. And you know what? What a shame, because David, I'm sure as a man, many people think that it's the women that likes being touched. I don't know if you hear this a lot with your clients being more gentlemen, but actually what I'm discovering is many men want touch. They thrive on touch. And all of a sudden you've got this woman, and I'm not even talking in menopause here, because even if we go into birth trauma, it can happen from the birth, and then it gets worse in menopause, perimenopause. All of a sudden they're not even being kissed goodnight or hugged by their partners. And so being a man yourself, David, how is that going to make you feel as a man if you're not even get that hug, let alone intimate connection?
And it's funny you say this. Like I've worked with a number of men who've been in this situation, not necessarily through menopause, but that they're in relationships, and what's started to happen is there's no physical intimacy. There's not a hug. There's not a kiss. There's not a cuddle in bed. And you're right there. Like a lot of men really are. And I said this, I can't remember what I was, or maybe it's in a podcast or a talk, is like men are really starved of physical intimacy, right? Because outside of their partners, they're not really getting any physical intimacy from anyone else, right? Maybe they get some from their kids, but it's definitely less than the mother. And what starts to happen for men, and like I said, there's a few clients I've worked with, is they just start to feel undesirable. So that starts to really hit their confidence of like, oh, my partner doesn't desire me. My partner doesn't find me attractive. My partner is repulsed by me, right? And this is something that I've seen quite often. And to just expand on it actually goes a number of ways, and I've seen guys who have they've experienced this in their relationship, and they start to retreat. They start to emotionally withdraw. They start to go within themselves. They start to just because they're feeling their confidence is feeling battered and bruised. And I've seen men who become really frustrated with their partners and almost quite catty and angry because there's a resentment underneath there that's trying to kind of be expressed, but they don't know how to kind of communicate it. And I've seen it almost completely the other way. Men who go and cheat outside the relationship because they were like, well, my partner doesn't desire me. They don't want to be near me. When I try and get close to them, they don't want anything to do with me. When I try and talk to them about it, they don't want to talk about it. And they somehow, they rationalize to themselves that it's okay for them, or that, they have no other choice than to go outside of the relationship. And as you said, this isn't just something that necessarily happens just for menopause. This is something that happens in relationship general, where we starve each other of closeness and touch. And as the example you used, it's actually quite common for it to happen when there's what I call kind of mechanical sex, where the sex is the same all the time. It's introduced in the same way. It's not an invitation to depth and desire. It's, and that's not the only reason it happens. It can kind of happen sometimes if there's some sort of physical injury or problem or issue or illness, but where we start to separate intimacy, there's no more intimacy in the relationship, especially physical intimacy and sexual intimacy, then there's this kind of ships that just start to part and get further and further away.
Yeah, and many of my clients that are going through perimenopause will say, and my partner's now got depression. And, you know, I didn't mean to laugh then, but it's like, oh my God. And as women, they say, we'll sort my partner's depression out, and then I'll sort myself out. And that just goes to show, like, this kind of, women will always try and nurture, you know, others. Coming back to the depression with the men, if men aren't being physically touched, and again, not mechanical duty sex, as you say, you know, we don't want that. But if they don't feel that desire, they feel rejected. If they don't feel that their partner wants to have sex with them, and you must be able to tell if somebody is really present and wanting this and not, right? And, you know, they might go through the motions and just be like, well, at least we're having it. But deep down, like you said, they're like, she doesn't find me attractive anymore. She doesn't want to touch me anymore, blah, 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 blah. And she's thinking different, like, oh my God, you know, I'm so exhausted. Da, 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 da. If only he would do this. And I had a client, and it took 2 sessions to sort their intimate relationship out. The communication outside needed a bit more work. But like I said, if you can't communicate outside of the bedroom, then you're not communicating inside of the bedroom. And actually, I used to work on communicating outside first. But then what I learned was the man will be so much more happier. He will do so much more for you if you give him intimacy, connection, love. Right? I mean, So if we're trying to work outside, I was like, let's actually work on the intimacy first. But my client's like, but I don't want to open my legs, you know, because our heart needs to be penetrated before we are penetrated. And that's when I bring like the heart intimacy, that kind of loving into it. And like, yeah, we can be intimate without this. And both people are like, oh, and then guess what happens? His depression lifts, like literally, because he's having sex. She feels more supported, and therefore she feels safer. She feels held by the masculine. And not, you know, many women want to admit this, like, I don't need a man in my life. Actually, there's nothing better than a man holding you and taking care of you. It's beautiful. Allow them to do it more. But they won't do it if they're not having sex. And then it just goes round and round in a circle. And yeah, I had a client that she said, oh, it's always the same. And he always does this thing that really irritates me. So I said, have you told him that thing really irritates you? Him, not in that way, because you're not going to get what you want. I mean, if I said, I really hate the way that you do that, and pushed, I really hate the way that you do that, and pushed your hand off, that's going to make that person feel rejected. So we don't do it that way. We guide them in a different way. And she was like, well, no, I don't want to hurt his feelings. So I said, so every time he has intimacy with you, he thinks he's doing something that you like because you haven't told him that you don't like it. And every time he does it, I said, how is that feeling in the body when he does what he does? And she says, I clam up. Well, of course she's not having internal orgasms if she starts intimacy like this. And it was so simple. And since they've come together and they actually communicate and talk during sex, they now communicate and talk outside of the bedroom. And guess what? Coming back round to menopause, her menopause isn't as bad as what she thought because she feels held, supported, and safe. Yeah, she's still got the unpredictability and whatnot. And like one of the things that I do with my clients is teach them to do it's not really in meditation, an embodiment practice before intimacy. And often they're like, oh, but my partner won't do that. Well, Doesn't mean that you don't have to do it. And if your partner wants more love with you and you want to stay together and be sleeping in this bed for another 20, 30 years, then can you give this a go? Yeah. And then share with him. Because what often happens with men, they're like, oh, well, I'll do the dishes then while you go and do that, whatever it is that you're doing, you know. But actually, if he understands, if you're listening to this, this is going to calm down her chaotic mind, as Emma said. This is going to make her feel more relaxed. And then you go into the bedroom, not then thinking that it's wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, but she's already in that relaxed state. And then you say to her, I would like to do XYZ with you, or would you be open to this? Or what is it that you need? And most of the time with me, it's a head massage. And you know what? Most of the time with my clients' partners, it's a head massage. Yet we go straight in with genital massage, and it's simply not what we really need in that moment.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's not interesting to me because I've seen it many times as well, but like the communication in the bedroom, you know, we have so much fear and worry about in that space. And I can imagine that when you're going through menopause, it must add a kind of heightened fear and concern, you know, just due to the changes that are occurring in the body. And there was a question that was in my mind, and I'm going to find it again. It's definitely in there somewhere. Do you find with your clients that there's a lot of resentment that builds up in their relationship when they're not communicating during this phase of menopause, when they're not communicating with each other what's going on? There's a lot of resentment starts to kind of build for both partners, the man and the woman.
Yeah, resentment is a massive, massive thing. Resentment, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment can all come up as well. But yeah, you've just got two people not communicating and feeling really rejected by each other. And it's actually so simple to bring, I call it two people dancing with each other's emotions and bringing back that harmony. Sadly, the resentment often started in the pregnancy, birth. If a woman didn't feel supported for whatever reason, it could be simply he didn't get there on time. Maybe it was an emergency and he was working away and he didn't get there on time. So nobody's fault. But she didn't feel safe and supported by the masculine. That resentment builds up and builds up and builds that up. So if you're listening to this and you're seeing that resentment starting, or it's been there a long time, then start working on this communication, on this intimacy, and it will really support you in menopause. Because one of the main things I hear is men have no idea. Well, they have no idea because their dad, it wasn't talked about. Menopause wasn't talked about. Our dads didn't talk about menopause. So of course they have no idea. It wasn't talked about at school. And now all they're hearing in the paper is menopause, HRT, this, that, and the other. So they don't understand. So actually it's up to us as women to educate them. Okay, but nobody wants like something thrown at them. You need to read this about menopause to understand it. Because if somebody throws me something, you need to read that. I never read it. It's not gonna, no. I want to know, the benefit, how it's going to benefit me, but also, that's just like, that's not the great way of doing it. Like, communicate. This is how I feel. How do you feel? How is menopause affecting you? How do you feel in this relationship? Right? And because many couples split up during menopause, and menopause gets the blame. And it's often because the woman's like, I'm not taking this crap anymore. The man didn't know what he'd done wrong or what to do or how to make it better. And like you said, she's not interested in sex anymore. He feels rejected. He goes off to somewhere else, or he ends up, you've got two pretty depressed, rundown people trying to pay this mortgage, trying to live in the life that they manifested that feels hard.
Yeah. And we've covered a lot in like how we can support each other, how men can support their women, and I know we're almost at time. But I wonder if there's anything else other than you've already said in terms of how men can support their female partners during this transitional phase of their lives.
Hugging, what do you need? How can I support you? I see you're up to capacity. I am too. You could even say, I see you're up to capacity. I am as well. Right? And then that makes you just look at life and go, this life is not serving us. Let's look at changes. I would say the number one thing is understand a female's cycle. So there's it's called Inner Seasons. I'm sure, David, I'll send you the details, and I'm sure you could tag this. And basically it's a clock. And it's basically has autumn, winter, spring, summer. And this is the seasons that a woman goes through every single month. It would be great if Monday to Sunday it was that, Monday to Sunday it was that, Monday to Sunday it was that. It doesn't work like that, sadly. But, just before her period, she may feel like autumn. And if you think about autumn, it's the leaves falling off the trees and everything just getting so hard. Everything feels like it's falling apart. That's how she's going to feel just before her bleed. I know she goes through that every single month, and I know that she goes through that every single month. But let me tell you, as a woman, every single month it feels like it's never gonna go away. So knowing that she's in her autumn, like having this poster or this clock that it is up in the kitchen for the rest of the family to see. Mom is in her autumn. What does mom need when she's in her autumn? Maybe on her bleed, buy red roses, right? To signify that mom's on a bleed. And I say mom's on a bleed, you may be having teenage daughters, right? Buy red roses or wear something red to see that, red tie to symbolize, I know that you're on your bleed. What do you need? Yeah. And learning the times of the cycle, and this doesn't always work, but there's certain times in her cycle that she is going to be more up for sex. And there's going to be times in her cycle when she isn't. If you can learn that, right, brownie points, gold star points. I'd say that is an amazing thing to understand.
Says I'm hearing there's like educating yourself about a woman's experience. It's not necessarily directly also her experience. I've been curious about her experience, but educating yourself about a woman's experience of the hormone shifts and changes that occur for her in her body. And I'm just going to add in one thing is that I had someone come on the podcast and talk about the very seasons about periods and period sex. It's Katie Moore. I can't remember the exact episode. Yeah. It's hard for me to remember all of them. But I'm going to add in is like for men, what we can always do is educate ourselves about these phases of a woman's life, right? So, as you said, there's the phase of bleeding, of periods occurring, the 4 seasons. And this episode, we've really gone into detail about menopause and learning about menopause, but also, like at the moment, my partner also, she's pregnant. So I've gone out of my way to go and find a book, right? It's called Pregnancy for Men, about pregnancy, for me to read and learn about her experience. And I keep mentioning this to guys I meet and people I meet, because it's a very easy thing for us to do. We live in a world that is abundant with information, absolutely abundant with information. So if you're a man and you're listening to this, you can ask questions. You can go to ChatGPT and go, ChatGPT, my wife is going through this. She's this many years old. What could I educate myself to understand her better? And ChatGPT will give you a whole list of things that you can go off and learn about. And this will take you no longer than about 5 minutes, about the same amount of time that you waste every single day on put your app in, Instagram, Facebook, Sky Sports News, The Guardian Sport, whatever it is, that would basically make your relationship better, not just with your partner, maybe with the other women in your life, in your workplace, even your daughters, for those of you who've got kids, to learn about puberty, to learn about what's like for your daughter to go through her first bleed. And these are the really simple ways in which we as men can make our lives, you know what? Men, paint it this way. It makes your life fucking easier, like to put it that way, but it also makes her life better. We can simply learn about these things instead of having the same sort of attitude that our fathers might have been like, that's not my problem. I don't need to know about that. She'll tell me when she needs to tell me. It's like just these little things go such a long way to enabling you to have a healthy, happier relationship, and not just intimate relationships, as I said, across the board. It's just these little learning points, because you can find a podcast about these topics in 30 to 40 seconds flat. You've got Spotify, you've got Apple Podcasts, wherever it is, you can go and you can find this information. And it's really valuable because you can have a conversation from a place of being educated about the topic instead of going with your kind of your cup empty, hoping that she's going to tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah, I love that. Because women are magical. Women's bodies are magical and mysterious. Yeah, and I don't think that's taught enough at school. Yeah, so if we want to live in harmony, we've got to understand each other's needs, everybody's needs in the house. Yeah, I love that, David. I love what you do.
Thank you. And this has been super educational for me because it's a topic that I guess I've been into a phase of my life I haven't really needed to know so much about it. It's come into my sphere a little bit through some family members. And I was like, oh, this is something that's affecting the people in my life. I want to know more about this. I'm super, super, really glad. I can say super glad, doesn't make sense. Really glad that you've been here today to talk about this. And I imagine the listeners are, wondering where they can hear more from you. They can listen to more of the amazing information and knowledge you have to say, and even work with you as well.
Yeah, so I am rapidly evolving. So my website is a little bit behind. So the best place is Instagram at @the_Emma Fullwood. So at @the_Emma Fullwood, or Emma Fullwood on Facebook. And my last thing that I want to say is menopause is not a woman's problem. It's a household problem, like not even problem, but it's a household thing. Blood is not a woman's problem. When a woman is on a bleed, the house is on the bleed. And if that is understood, I really think that, we can change the next generation and how they see women's problems. So thanks for having me.
Beautiful. Thank you. And listeners, if you enjoyed the episode, you've learned something, get in contact. It's always good to hear from people to know what they've taken away, what they've learned. But yeah, I say a big thank you to Emma. Thank you for your wisdom and knowledge. And listeners, thank you for listening. And if you're listening to this and someone could do with this information, please just send them the episode. Just share it. It doesn't have to be a thing you have to worry about what they're going to think, because this is you're sending it with love. So send it forward with love and kindness and support as well. But until next week, I'll say ciao, ciao. I want to say a big thank you for listening. It's people like yourself that really help get the podcast out into the world. Especially if you're often sharing the episodes and the podcast with people that you feel just could do with listening, right? Can see a different way of being a man, maybe a different way of having dating lives and intimacy and relationships. So I want to say a big thank you. And if maybe after listening this episode, you think, oh, there's someone actually who could really do with this, please share it with them. Share the love. I'm really, really grateful. And if you want to get in contact with me for any questions, or you want to talk about coaching or any working together, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at @theauthenticman_, or you can email me hello@theauthenticman.net. Thank you very much.